It gives me great pleasure to get this started with my colleague Kelvin Glen. Kelvin and I have worked together for a very long time, probably longer than either of us would like to admit. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about what we've been up to over lockdown.
Right, thank you very much, Mel. Welcome everybody. Really excited to be here. So my name is Kelvin Glen. I have an organization called Khulumasa and have worked in the charity sector for many years. Majority of that has been in the civil society and charity space, as well as spending some years in the corporate social investment space, working across international, national, and local organizations. Melanie and I go way back to the World AIDS Conference in 2003, where we met, and have become great mates and worked very closely together over the years. And recently, during lockdown, we felt we needed to do something as experienced fundraisers to get back to our community. So we started an initiative called Fundraising Talk, which is a free webinar every Thursday at 10 a.m. And we have various presentations and talks, and we talk everything fundraising. And whether it's individual giving, whether it's corporate fundraising, whether it's strategy, whether it's board, we sometimes have guest speakers on. So yeah, we collaborate well together, and I'm really privileged and excited to be able to share this platform with you today, Melanie.
Thank you, Kelvin. And in addition to our fundraising talk presentations that we do every Thursday, we also have a WhatsApp group that's very active. We have 130 people, I think it is now, on the chat, and we share ideas, we ask questions, we ask for help. We share best practice. So if you would like to join the tribe, please pop that into the chat box. Kelvin is monitoring the chat box for us today because I am the keeper of the slides. And we're looking forward to a great session and very interactive. We're going to try and whiz through the presentation pretty quickly so that we've got lots of time for questions. So please put your thinking caps on. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Kelvin, over to you.
So welcome everybody once again. So we really wanted to share this slide with you, which is courtesy of Jeff Brooks Fundraising in the UK. And really there's 4 phases in this reality of new normal that we're dealing with, which has now been, 6 months in South Africa. First is the bump, which is the surge in emergency giving, and everyone responds, and it's chaos, and it's quick, and everyone jumps on the bandwagon. Then we're in the slump, which is phase 2, which is where we are now, which is the medium-term length period of lower than normal giving. And why do we say that? Is that when we start campaigns around an emergency fund, and I've worked with organizations with International Red Cross, so I speak from experience, the peer pressure from society and the media coverage means that everybody wants to help and everybody jumps on the bandwagon and throws money at it or throws resources at it. And then it plateaus off because either people get tired of it, they run out of money, the media don't cover the story any longer, and then you go into phase 3, which is the slump, which is where we are now. And the dotted line is the normal. The solid line is the reality of anticipated response to fundraising globally, not only in South Africa. Phase 3 is the surge, which is where people start recovering again and your longer term grants come into effect. Your corporates start funding the specific programs related to COVID, or like in the States where Black Lives Matter has created huge momentum. And then you get what we call the new normal, which is how things are changing. So as the title very appropriately says, Fundraising 2.0, we believe that fundraising has changed. What you did and what you planned for this year is out the window. The way you did it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago is gone. We are in a new environment. We need to do things differently. We need to be more creative. We need to learn from each other. So platforms like this are so important. And Melanie and I always say when we present, we are merely sharing our skill set, our knowledge, our experience. We are facilitating. We're not the experts. We don't know it all. None of us do. So the more questions we get from everyone and the interaction we have, that is how we help each other. So where we are now, we're in phase 2, which is the slump, which is the medium-term period where you will see a drop in income, but it will pick up again in phase 3. It's just one of those things that we're dealing with at the moment.
Definitely, there's no doubt about that. And I just wanted to add on this slide, you can see that there's a funny dotted line. I don't know if you can see my
Yeah, at the
cursor
bottom there.
that runs at the bottom. And I wanted to particularly draw attention to that because, as Jeff has so carefully pointed out, that line is going to be even lower if we don't increase communication and make a strong case for support. And I was particularly, I don't think amused is the right word, intrigued perhaps, by those 3 question marks at the end of that funny line, which is what will actually happen if we don't get up above that baseline after our slump. So I'm finding this is a really clear reflection of where we're at now, and I think it's going to be a reflection of where we go. So it's a really important slide. But I wanted to talk a little bit about where we're going. What is this 2.0? And I think that it's important that, as Kelvin said earlier, we don't have all the answers. I wish we did. We'd probably be very rich and sitting on an island somewhere, self-isolating in the sun. It's very cold and rainy in Cape Town today, so I'm very keen on the sun at the moment. But what we're trying to do is create an environment and a platform where people can share, and together we can find the solutions that we're looking for.
Yeah.
But there are some basics that we really need to embrace. And one of them, I absolutely love the little cartoon that's on this page. I've used it in a couple of my presentations now. And basically it's Moses and Noah having an argument. And every time I look at that, I think about fundraising and programs, because sometimes it feels as though we're working against one another rather than with one another. And I think that that's something that we really, really need to address. It needs to change, and it needs to change now. We need to understand every bit of what we're selling. And make no mistake, guys, this is a sales job. If you think it's not, you're in the wrong profession. So we need to know everything we can about what we're doing, what are our interventions. But the flip side of that coin, and I have a rather blunt way of putting things, shall we say, and I want to say nasty words, but I will try and moderate and say, if you give us miserable interventions that do not have impact, we cannot fundraise for them. And it's as simple as that. And the only way we're going to overcome that barrier is if we work together to make things better. So if you take nothing else home today, please take that. Work with your projects, with your implementers. Learn everything you can, because your ability to sell your project and put your project forward with all of its unique factors and elements is what is going to make the difference going forward. The next thing that we need to look at very, very clearly is strategy. What we thought we were going to do, as we all on round about the 15th of January got back into our chairs and looked at 2020 and told each other it was going to be the best year ever, it's not like that anymore. So there is still opportunity. Don't get me wrong. There's massive opportunity. I think that we've fallen into a scarcity mindset that we actually were in before COVID even was a thing. And it's a horrible place to be. There is money. Make no mistake. The trick is we have to be good enough, impactful enough, bright enough, innovative enough to be able to be the ones who are successful in getting that money. So it's time to rewrite the fundraising plan. Get your thinking caps on, talk to your team and make it happen. And what's going to be more and more important, and we are going to talk about this a little further on in the presentation, is relationships. Relationships with beneficiaries, relationships with board members, relationships with other organizations working in the same space as we are. All critical. And the last point on this slide for me is absolutely vital. I don't know if anybody watched Bill Tolliver's presentation. Bill is the chairman of the Resource Alliance, amazing man. He presented in a series of webinars that the Resource Alliance has been putting on. And one of the things that he said is stay on course. Keep your mission at the heart of everything you do. Because if you don't do that and we go into mission drift, not only will Moses and Noah be having an argument, the ark will be rudderless. So really remember that. Keep focused on why you are here, what you came to do.
Yeah. And Mel, sorry, just to add to that, I think the cartoon is quite clever in the sense of it's also about talking to our donors. We see all too often that the donor phones you and says, we want to do feeding, but the donor's never done feeding before and they want you to do feeding in this Dorpy in the Eastern Cape where you don't operate. Don't do it, ladies and gentlemen, because you're going to set yourself up for failure. So be very strict about sticking to your knitting, staying focused, and educate your donor, because donors react to public and peer pressure, but you might not be the best organization to do that. So be the bigger person and pass it on to a colleague that it works in that area, that can do it more cost effectively, more efficiently, and be more proactive, because that will also come back to you in return one day. But don't rush out new programs you've never done before in areas you've never worked before, because your donor is dictating. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the right ethical pill to swallow and do it that way.
Absolutely. And we have to know that, as we've already seen across the world, even before the thing that shall not be named, if anyone's a Harry Potter fan, organizations are merging, organizations are partnering. It's about amplifying your impact. And if we're able to keep those relationships with our donors, with our partners, with what we may consider our competitors, it will make us stronger. The time for silos is over.
Yeah. All right. So let's thrive in the slump. We're in a slump. We all know that. That's reality. And it's not only our sector, it's every sector. But how do we thrive in that? How do we pick ourselves up? And I think charities and fundraisers are very resilient people. I always say when I do training or when I'm mentoring fundraisers, if you don't have thick skin and you're going to take things personally, you're not going to survive in the sector. So it's very important that you pull up your socks, you pick yourself up, get up, dress up, show up, and make it happen. But the important thing is to reconnect to your mission. Have an internal conversation. Reconnect about why this organization started. What is its purpose? What is it here to do? Don't get swayed by the chaos and the noise that's happening at the moment. And don't start putting social media posts out about COVID and medical if you don't play in that field. We saw this in the 80s when we had the AIDS pandemic in Africa. Everyone suddenly was doing AIDS projects and wanted money for AIDS. It's not sustainable, ladies and gentlemen. So thrive in the slump. Reconnect to your mission. Communicate, and how do you do that? Communicate with your beneficiaries. Have conversations with your beneficiaries. Understand what's going on in the communities, because you're the best person to communicate with your donors and the public about that community if you are true community development workers working in that community. Have discussions with your donors. Your donors don't want to have uncomfortable discussions. None of us do, but have discussions with your donors. What does next year look like? How are things going? Is your budget going to be cut? Are you going to be still supporting us? Can we look for more funding? Do we need to readjust our budget and ask for less funding? Rather get 10% less funding and keep a donor than upset a donor and lose all the funding. Understand where they are. There's some sectors like the alcohol sector, the tobacco sector, the car sales sector, the tourism sector. If you think you're going to get the same level of funding from them next year, you are smoking your socks, excuse the pun. So have a conversation with them now. I'm working with big alcohol companies, and they are really struggling about how they communicate with the beneficiaries to say, guys, we're going to have to make a plan for all of you, but rather make a plan for all of you and keep all of you and give you less funding and try to continue, then cut one or two off. But you need to be proactive and talk to your donors. Please have discussions with your staff and your team. They are going through hell just like you are, just like we are. There's a huge amount of uncertainty. We don't know where the next penny is coming from. We don't know what's happening with Europe, with the US. Things can change tomorrow. have and create that environment where people can be okay about expressing concerns, worries, and also celebrate. You know, when a donor comes and says, you know, we really want to support you during these difficult times, we want to give you free petrol or a vehicle or extra funding, buy a cake or do a virtual coffee meeting, but celebrate it, because we mustn't also get so focused on the crisis management and the rescue plan that we forget to remember to celebrate our successes and thank our teams. If you have not had a conversation with your board about revising strategy, revising budget, looking at where you're going, you're already behind. Your board needs to be engaged in these conversations at board level. And if you're not the CEO, you need to push your CEO to have a conversation with the board and have the honest, hard conversations about, we planned this for this year, but because of the situation, you know, we're going to have to adjust, and rather be proactive than reactive, because nobody wants to be able to explain at the end of the year why you're 40% down on income. Rather adjust your budget now. And most importantly is your networks. Most importantly is your networks. Reach out to your colleagues who are working in the same sector. So if you're working in the ECD space, form informal collaboration bodies, put joint venture proposals together, form consortiums, share resources, do these types of things, work creatively, try and save money here and there by working together, complement each other. But the bottom line is, if you're going to thrive in this slump, you've got to be able to put your heart on your sleeve, do a lot of talking, have a lot of conversations, over and above the normal 8 to 5 that we all have to do, which is getting those proposals out and getting the money in. But what we're really saying is, we're an amazing, resilient bunch of people. So if you can't call on each other, how can you support yourself and your family and your team if you've got no one supporting you? And let's be honest, fundraising can be a very lonely game, because often nobody else in the organization understands when you have all the pressure on these two shoulders about getting the money in. So call on your network. But to thrive, you're going to have to build and reconnect. Communicate, and really importantly, go back and have a good, honest conversation about your mission, and make sure you're reconnecting with that mission and you're staying focused.
Absolutely, Kelvin. If I can just add to that, I'm so glad that you brought it back to the mission, because one of the things I've started to do with clients, and I get immense value, probably as much if not more value as they do, is using Simon Sinek's model. I don't know if anybody has watched his brilliant video from 2008 around finding your why and why good leaders are good. It's really excellent. And out of that, he's sparked a kind of a movement that talks very strongly about reconnecting with your why. And with his team, they've produced a how-to manual, a little guidebook on how to actually have a reconnecting with your why session in your organization. I really would recommend that so highly. We talk about things like what encouraged you to apply for your job, what brings you back every day, what makes you proud about the organization. And it's truly amazing what you hear and the stories that you can use. If you've been watching Kathy's session, if you watch Jennifer's session, all of that storytelling comes through in those sessions. So I really would recommend that either doing it on Zoom or doing it in person, but get to doing that and reconnect with why your organization exists.
Yeah. And Melanie, as we go on to the next slide, just another quick tidbit is, I think the one positive that's come out of this crisis, and there's always a positive in every crisis, is that we have unlocked so much free information. There is free webinars every single day, ladies and gentlemen. There's a huge amount of stuff on YouTube. So if you're not spending 2 or 3 hours a day, even if it's after hours, enhancing your own skill set by attending webinars, networking, building new relationships. I mean, between this organization, our fundraising talk, Resource Alliance, the Institute of Fundraising around the world, they're all putting out free information, not to mention YouTube. So we actually have no excuse to not take this time while we're stuck at home and working at home, to the 2 hours you're going to save in traffic, use that time to build your skill set and enhance your ability.
Definitely. So then the next thing we need to look at is where we're getting money from where we've received money from in the past and where we think we're going to get money from in the future. Now, those who know me well know that this is a slide I use often, and I use it with pride because this comes from a real organization. It's an organization I sat on the board of. It's a small Cape Town-based organization that works with the homeless, and this is actually their split. This is how they raise their money, and I was so proud of them, and I remain proud of them because this is such a balanced funding basket. Let me quickly whiz you through it so that you can just get a sense of what I mean when I say a balanced funding basket. You can see that no particular piece of the pie is dominant. If we start at 12 o'clock and go clockwise around our pie, trusts and foundations are 17%, individuals 7%, service organizations 10%, government 7%, international sources 12%, cause-related marketing 14%, income generation 15%, and corporates 18%. Now, what this does is it mitigates your risk when you lose a donor, because the reality is we will lose donors. When it's individuals, people change jobs, people lose their jobs, they're no longer in a position to help. They move house and they don't tell you their new address, they change their banking information and don't share that with you. All sorts of things happen. Corporates change their focus, the same with trusts and foundations, although to a lesser degree, but trusts and foundations are very conscious of not creating dependency. So you'll find while they are lovely long-term partners to have, they're very cautious about what that long-term actually means to them. But in this, and I've shared this advice with the organization, and it's advice that I would share anytime, there's only one thing I would change. I would try to increase that 7% of individuals, because I believe very strongly that going forward, as it is in the rest of the world, individuals are going to form the backbone of our fundraising efforts. The other thing I wanted to point out before we move on and ask Kelvin if he would like to share anything, that 7% on the government funding, I think is just right. I do believe that government has a responsibility, certainly for certain types of nonprofits, to help to fund, but the danger of becoming dependent on that funding is high, and I would caution very strongly against it. We need everybody in our corner, and sometimes the people we need in our corner are people who are in government. But the trick is to balance that relationship and not let it become dangerous. Kelvin?
Absolutely, Mel, and I actually used this over the weekend when I was talking to someone, and I was saying to them that the great thing about an ideal funding mix, and look, this isn't the fluffy perfect world, is that if one of these quadrants has a drop, you're not in trouble. But when you have an organization where 80% of their income is coming from a government grant or the national lottery or corporate social investment, ladies and gentlemen, jy's in groot moeilikheid. You're in big trouble, because those are going to be at risk, like any industry. But if you have a balanced scorecard or balanced fundraising mix, if one drops by 1%, it's not going to break the bank. So I always say to organizations, do this annually when you're doing your plans and your budgets, but then review it quarterly. And set your targets based on this, because it's no use chasing just the money in the corporates. And yes, you raise that money in the corporates, fantastic, but you're ignoring individual giving or online giving. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So it's a lovely exercise to do. Challenge yourself as one of the to-do lists after this presentation and go and do it. And you'll be shocked when you actually do the exercise where your money's coming from and where it's being spent.
And I would also add to that, definitely do this exercise, but don't just do it for the last financial year. Go as far back as you can, at least 3 years, because that's going to show you what the trends are. It's going to show you perhaps you've got a consistent decline in one sector. And that could mean two things. Either you're not paying it enough attention, or something has changed in your offering or in the focus of that sector that means that you no longer have a match. Because the other thing that's really important to remember is that different donors have different priorities. and different sources, so we refer to these as sources of funding, different sources are attracted to different projects. I'm going to give you a great example. One of my clients, I think there might even be some folk on the call today, works in infrastructure for preschools and primary schools. And one of their projects is an individual direct mail program into Europe. And what we found there was people loved supporting the preschools. They loved supporting the little kids. They thought that it was fantastic, and we got wonderful support from our donors there. The primary school project was to build libraries using prefabricated units or shipping containers to create a library for a school. But the perception was that that was a job for government to do, and it didn't attract them all that much. We didn't do very well when we asked people to support libraries. But the flip side of that coin is it became a fantastic way for corporates to support the organization, because it gave them an opportunity to brand the project and just really make it their own. So as you can see, there are definitely different projects and different funders for different projects is what I'm trying to say. But let's move on.
Right, very busy slide. But basically what we're saying here is new financing models. So the traditional, let's get money from corporate, let's apply for a government grant, let's apply for a USAID grant, let's ask Aunt Bessie down the road to give us 50 rods. You need to relook at your funding models. And hence we put in the word financing models, because globally there's some nice new stuff coming out about impact investing, about unlocking blended finance, which is not the traditional, please give us money and we will hopefully do something. It's a business transaction. We are providing a much needed service to the community, and henceforth the community is able to be developed and contribute to the economy and micro enterprise and social enterprise development, blah, 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 blah. But for that we need capital. And it's not for the faint-hearted, especially if you have a conservative board that is not open to new ideas. You need to get a guest speaker in or showcase a case study of a success. But ladies and gentlemen, if you've not got this in your pipeline for the next year, 2 or 3 years, where you start looking at blended financing models and you start looking at commercial transactions and running your organization as a not-for-profit business, not an Achshame charity. The Achshame charity died a long time ago. It's a not-for-profit business run along business principles. And we encourage you to look at the blended finance model. There's lovely stuff on the internet. And also this presentation is being recorded. Otherwise, get in touch with us. We can guide you through it. And it doesn't mean you throw everything at it, but take one of your projects or one of your sub-projects and look at how you can implement income generation project or blended financing model or a social enterprise development, because you're also unlocking a whole plethora of support and funding that is not your traditional cap in hand begging. So we really are encouraging you to think out of the box, have a discussion with your management team, get experts in to help you build it. But if you've got the right solution that is going to address a problem that society is dealing with, you're the technical experts to provide the solution, and you've got an investor that's going to invest in that through impact investing or blended finance, hey, we all win. So there's a whole new world out there around financing models. And really what it says is, don't do your traditional fundraising. Look at financing models for programs that are going to give a return, that are going to deliver a service, and that are going to address an issue. And therefore, it's a win-win for government, it's a win-win for your organization, and it's a win-win for your backer or your financier, because they're willing to finance programs knowing that there's more risk, but the return is higher because it's not just a financial model, it's also a social good model.
Absolutely. And I think that when we look at things like income generation, it's beyond the second-hand shop. It's beyond the charity shop model that the UK piloted and is the champion of. Certainly in the Western Cape, we have got some organizations doing amazing things in the income generation space. Obviously a little bit constrained at the moment, But that will pass, like all things. It may pass like a kidney stone, but it will pass and things will change. We will be able to get out there again. So I'm thinking of the Zip Zap Circus School Trust with their amazing performances that allow them to generate their own income from ticket sales.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking of neighborhood old age homes, NOAA, and their incredible projects, which included, I might add, getting a donor to buy the corner cafe for them, which they've now completely remodeled in Woodstock, near where their headquarters are. And it's supplying sandwiches to the buildings and the businesses in the area. It's providing a service to the community around it. Absolutely wonderful stuff. And I'm sure you could think of 100 more examples, but we have so much time.
Yeah.
So, the dawn of Digital 2.0. Well, who would have imagined in January of this year that we would be sitting today doing what we're doing? I don't know about you, Kelvin, but I certainly didn't. I'm not the most tech-savvy person on the planet, and I miss talking to real humans. But digital has become our friend in just about no time at all. It's been absolutely amazing to see how tech-savvy organizations are really embracing it. They're grabbing it with both hands and they're saying, let's go with it. And it is working. And that's what the wonderful thing is. So as we've said probably in most of our speeches, I know Jennifer mentioned it in her talk about social media and online, there are lots of tools that the average person on the street would have to pay for, but they are free to nonprofits. Please find out about them. One of the most amazing sources of that information is a company or a nonprofit here in South Africa called Pambano Technologies. Please get in touch with them. They are actually, they're speaking at the same time as us, one of their CEOs. But please get in touch with them because there is so much tech that's available to nonprofits, either heavily discounted or for free. We need to take advantage of this.
Absolutely. Yeah, now, and I think that it goes back to, remember those of you that are as old as we are, when in the 80s we were all talking about, do we need a website? You know, do we actually need to spend money putting a website together? And we were all like questioning it. The same with technology, ladies and gentlemen. If you've not got cloud-based solutions, if you're not backing up, if you're not mobile friendly, which just brings so nicely into the next slides, which is the rise of the multi-channel fundraising plan. So this is the traditional model that we learned in Fundraising 101 many years ago. But basically, any organization needs to have a multi-channel approach. And these are all your options. So you can have mobile, phone, which is actual call centers, peer-to-peer, which is your face-to-face and your peer-to-peer reviews, your major donor, benefactors, social media, direct mailing, advocacy, a website, your email campaigns, and your TV campaigns, direct messaging or direct response TV campaigns, which is big overseas, not so big here, events, and then online donations. Now, none of us, even in the perfect world, do this perfectly and have this perfectly balanced. But I do highly recommend that even if you're a charity that's brand new, that's got one person and 50 beneficiaries, you need to be doing at least 2 or 3 of these. So website is imperative. If you don't have a website, no one's going to take you seriously. If people can't donate on that website and it's not secure and it can't receive online donations, no one's going to take you seriously. Please make sure that your website is mobile friendly so that it is clear on a mobile and on a website, and Gmail and email. Please, big taboo, no donor is going to trust you if you start emailing from Gmail and Yahoo accounts. You need a domain linked to your website. This is a professional transaction. You're asking on behalf of an organization. Do not use private Gmail accounts. You're not going to be taken seriously. So make sure you're doing email campaigns. And email campaigns you can set up yourself with some great technology. Obviously, as you grow bigger, you need bigger systems. But until you get up to 1, 2, 3,000 big database, you can do it yourself. It's very easy. So you've got no excuse not to be doing email campaigns, an up-to-date, free website, some social media, and make sure that your website is mobile friendly. If you do those 4 as a starting points, you're on the road to the right direction. Obviously, depending on the organization, some organizations are much better and they talk perfectly to events. Some organizations don't fit in with events. Not many organizations do DRTV because it's so expensive in our country and the return is not great. Peer-to-peer also can be very expensive and it takes time to build and get a return on investment. But what we're basically saying is don't rely on one channel and don't think by sending one proposal or one email or one appeal letter or one Aksham letter that you're going to reach your budget. You have to look at a multi-channel approach. And this is where building individual giving comes in. Plus, if your website is up to date and talks to your newsletter, and remember that the donor that reads your social media post is not necessarily going to be the same donor that reads your newsletter. And it's not necessarily going to be the same donor that goes onto your website to give a gift. Don't push debit orders unless you have to. People are very reluctant with debit orders. They get very expensive in our country. There's a lot more cost-effective, quick options as far as online giving. So what we always say to people is critique. Hold up the mirror and take a good hard look at your organization. Or what I always say to people is find a friend. So Melanie and I, when we were fortunate to live in the same town, were coffee buddies. We would obviously and often pick up the phone to each other and say, I need coffee because I need to just vent because our industry is so tough. And we would share bad ideas of each other. But if I want Melanie to critique one of my projects, or I want to critique the multi-channel fundraising of a project, I'd say to Mel, hey, have a look at this and tell me what you think. Because obviously I'm going to be biased because I'm close to the project. So ask a friend, a family member, a fellow fundraiser, a board member, a donor to go and test all your platforms. Because you are so close to it, you obviously and often don't see the mistakes. It's like in our own homes. We don't see the cracks and the chips on the wall and the dent in the car because we drive it every day. But somebody else will see it immediately. So get independent review of your systems, take the critique on board, find support and partners that will help you. There's a lot of organizations that do freebies, but there are risks with that. And then there's some very affordable solutions. So basically you have no excuse not to be looking at a multi-channel fundraising approach because it will help you in growing your databases, your support, telling your stories, building relationships. Because remember, donors also do their own research. I've sat in that seat where I've had the joy and the tears of being in CSI and handing out money to charity. But believe me, any corporate that gives money to charity has to do their own risk analysis. And if their risk analysis comes out that your website's outdated and your online donations are dodgy and your phone numbers are outdated and your campaigns are not right, you risk losing that donor. So take this opportunity to really look at your comms and your multi-channel fundraising and make sure that whatever you're doing, do it 100%, but you should be doing at least 4 of these.
Definitely. We had so much we wanted to share with you today, and we've tried to cram in as much as we can. So apologies if we're bombarding you with stuff. And please do feel free to get in touch with us afterwards if anything particularly grabbed your attention or if there's anything we can help with. But I just quickly wanted to touch on storytelling. I was a journalist many, many moons ago, and that's my training and background. And so storytelling is an absolute passion of mine. And it is something that we in the sector have so much to say about. There are so many good stories for us to share. So when you are doing your planning and you're planning your communication with your various stakeholders, look at your storytelling and look at what the stories are that you're sharing and who would be the best people to hear that news. But I've made a little note here. Since the first people learned how to make fire, we've been telling stories. And that is so true. Everything we do is built on storytelling. And I wanted to just remind everyone about the hero's journey. And if anybody has read the Harry Potter books, reads Tolkien, watches Star Wars, Star Trek, any of those epic movies, this is exactly what happens. It's almost formulaic. And we need to take the hero's journey and bring it into our storytelling, because that is what gets our message across and helps people to understand our why, so that they can realize it resonates with their why and they become a donor or supporter. So I'm just very quickly going to shoot through it. So you have the call to adventure. If you're a follower of Lord of the Rings, you'll know exactly what that means. It means strange men in strange outfits knocking on your door in the middle of the night. Supernatural aid, threshold, the beginning of the transformation. There's always a mentor and a helper along the way. Challenges and temptations. The abyss, some sort of cataclysmic moment in your story that results in transformation because you've had a revelation. There's atonement and there's return. So it's so funny. When I first started to use this in my work, it felt a little stilted. But so quickly I recognized that this is the foundation for storytelling. And if we can pull these elements in when we're writing our stories about our organizations, it just makes it stronger. I wanted to give you a couple of story examples. And Jen, who was the speaker in the previous session in this stream, Jennifer Gabb, has given us some fantastic examples of stories. So please, if you didn't attend her session, please go and hunt down the recording that will be available on our YouTube channel. It's absolutely worth it. But you can look at stories as appeals for support. It's a way to highlight the problems that need solutions. Founding stories, those are always so interesting. How did an organization come about? Why? What prompted somebody to feel so strongly that they create a movement or an organization? We love telling stories of our successes, and so we should, because as Kelvin said, we don't celebrate enough. We need to celebrate more. Sometimes, though, we need to talk about our challenges, because it's in talking about them that we have and we can show the opportunities to transform them into successes. So it is really important. You know, somebody said to me, I have to write a report to a donor, but this didn't go so well and I don't know how to frame that. And my response to them is, well, you frame it as it didn't go so well. But what you need to then explain is what you're going to do to correct the situation, or the steps you need to take to do things differently. And you can take those challenges and turn them into opportunities that very often lead to more funding. And the last one I wanted to highlight here is that through our storytelling, we get to offer hope. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. And in our next slide, we're going to take a little more serious note for just a minute, and I'm going to hand over to Kelvin for this one.
My child is dying. I can't choose when, but please let me choose where. Jack, my gorgeous 8-year-old boy, who loves Mr. Men. Jack is currently in intensive care, and I've been told he's going to die. I don't want Jack to die surrounded by machines. I want Jack to have nice, clean hair when he dies. I want to cuddle Jack in his Mr. Men duvet when he dies. I want the last thing he hears is my voice reading Mr. Bump, his favorite bedtime story, when he dies. This would not happen in hospital. So I choose for Jack to go to Clare House. At Clare House, Nurse Ruth helped me wash Jack's hair with his shampoo, so he smelled like Jack again. Heather put Jack's Mr. Men duvet on the bed, so it felt like Jack's bed again. I cuddled Jack in his bed, read him his favorite bedtime story, and kissed him one last time before he died. Clare House helped me to do this. We couldn't stop Jack from dying. But with your donation, Clare House can support moms like Amanda to choose where Jack dies and create memories that will last a lifetime.
Thank you, Kelvin. I cannot read that without crying, so I made Kelvin do it. But I wanted to show you the power of a well-told story. This is a small children's hospice in the UK. It was shared by the wonderful Alan Clayton, who's a very well-known international fundraiser who focuses very strongly on individual giving. And the fact that I have read this probably 150 times and I cannot read it without choking up tells me that this is a beautiful story. And it's not a happy story, but it is so powerful. And the storytelling element is so strong. And that's what I want for all of our nonprofits, to be able to tell their stories, whatever they might be, with the same level of passion and dedication. I mean, doesn't it just make you want to rush out and make a donation to this organization? I certainly do.
And I think for me, Mel, it's about we all parents, uncles, godparents, aunties, uncles. And if any of us were in the situation, God forbid we'd want a clear house around the corner. So what I love about the story is it doesn't say, we are Clear House, we do A, B, C, D, E. They tell you what they do through the story. But the beauty is they have told the story from the beneficiary's perspective. There is one sentence about what Clear House actually does. But the story and their journey that Amanda took us along in one page was more powerful than a 20-page thesis or a 40-page proposal. So this, excuse the pun, but the story here, ladies and gentlemen, is you need to find your Clear House story in your organization. And it's not always you as the fundraiser that will find it. Talk to your beneficiaries. Talk to people. Listen.
Talk to your program people, because they're
Absolutely.
the ones who these stories every day.
Go and spend time in the trenches. Interview and talk to the beneficiaries. Talk to your program people. Talk to the drivers, the nurses, the care workers. They are the ones with these gem stories. And no one wants to fundraise for a hospice, let's be honest. It's not a nice thing to have to raise money for, let alone a children's hospice. But if you go into Clear House's website, and I had a look at it again this morning, they've got updated stories all the time of parents just being so thankful that it was okay. So learn from this, wipe the tears away, but with that, learn that we can learn from each other. That's what we said at the beginning. So you also need to be minding what your competitors and what your colleagues are doing and what's working for them. Because this is a wonderful direct mail piece or an individual giving piece, or even an advert in a magazine or on a website. Because if this doesn't move you, you're not human.
Absolutely.
Let's move on.
Yes, right. On to cheerier things, because everybody knows monitoring and evaluation is such a cheery topic. So I can't begin to tell you how important this slide is. Increasingly, over the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've seen a shift particularly in donor thinking, but also in nonprofit thinking, to impact, to the importance of impact, to the fact that if we cannot show the impact, we will not be funded. One of my mentors as a young, innocent fundraiser was the amazing Jill Ritchie. And Jill always tells everyone in all the training that she does, and I've been to so many of her sessions, she always says, donors only fund one thing. And people's responses are always, oh, it's puppies or children, and she says, no, 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 no. Far more fundamental than that. The only thing that a donor funds is change. And if you can't show the change, you will not get the funding. So that's why we really wanted to emphasize monitoring and evaluation as part of this session. There's a lot of confusion about it. People seem to be almost a little bit afraid of it. Dive in with both feet. You really, really need to get a handle on this. Your organization needs to get a handle on this. And when we talk back about strategizing and setting up our fundraising plans, when you are writing your funding proposals for your projects, if there is no clear monitoring and evaluation plan, If there is no clear path to tell you what success is going to look like, you are really going to struggle to write your funding proposal. So work with your programs team. If you are so fortunate as to have a dedicated monitoring and evaluation person, work with them. Learn about how they're going to show the change. How will they know when their intervention is successful? And also importantly, what steps are they going to take if they can see that something isn't working? Because those are the kinds of things that donors want to know. Donors understand that we don't know everything, but they're very conscious of the fact that we need to know what we're going to do when things don't go well.
And Mel, just on that before we move on, I think it's very important that we get honest and get real. I always challenge organizations. Any charity that tries to tell me that they can achieve 100% on every project every day of the week is lying. You will have bumps in the road. You will have problems. But also, if you don't have a clear monitoring and evaluation framework, when you're doing the funding application, how do you convince the donor of the impact you're going to make with their funding? So to reinforce what Melanie is saying is, start at step one, which is knowing your M&E and what is the impact. And Mel puts it so beautifully, which I'll never get the wording right, but you want to take your organization from where to where, from here to there. What do you need to get there? How are you going to do it? And how are you going to measure that impact? And what is it going to cost? But if you don't know that, you're not ready to fundraise. So make sure you're what we call fundraising ready. And if you don't have this framework in place, you've got to get it right. And there's lots of free resources as well. Google is your friend. So we really encourage you to unpack. So I think that what you're seeing about this Fundraising 2.0 is it's not just about writing proposals and thank you letters. It's about bringing everything together in the whole organization to make sure you're giving your donor the best possible package and you're delivering the best possible service.
Absolutely.
With that, bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is you've got lots of choices. As the slide shows you, you've got 6 doors there. We are not able to go through every door because every door is going to have a different outcome. As fundraising goes and looking at Fundraising 2.0, you need to really, really know what is behind each one of those doors and what door you're going to go through. And if you're going to choose the yellow door, why? And what are the risks of that door and what's on the other side? What does it cost you to get through that door? And also know what's behind the other doors and why you're not going to go through those doors. Because if you have a strong, balanced, engaged board and CEO, they should be challenging you and saying, why are we going through the yellow door, door number 2 and not door number 4? So know that you have got that balance. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mel. This has been an absolute blessing and privilege to be able to share and inspire. And I really hope that we've encouraged all of you to become better fundraisers, to network, to connect. And please share your stories, share your successes, share your fears. You know, we really are working hard at building a movement where we can support each other. And as I said, it can be a very lonely road and nobody else in your organization will understand what you're going through. But a fellow fundraiser will, so reach out. So we hope that you made new friends. We want to thank you for your time and for joining us. And just thank you, Mel. It's been an absolute privilege to once again have the opportunity to present with you. And stay safe, everyone. Stay warm. And we look forward to engaging with you in one and another platform in the near future.
Absolutely. Kelvin, always fun. I think we have more fun than anybody else when we do these. But thanks, everyone. Stay warm, stay safe, and we will see you again at Think Good next year. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.